So here we go. The Endless Knot. It's a slideshow on symbols in Buddhism. And I'm starting here with the eight-spoked wheel of Dharma, or the wheel of truth. The interesting thing about this is that for some reason, interfaith groups and world religions have chosen this as the emblem of Buddhism. So if you see a little cross for Christianity and a crescent for Islam and so on, you'll see the eight-spoked Dharma wheel for Buddhism. But it's only one of many, many symbols in Buddhism, although it is an important one. Now, what is a symbol? I think sometimes we think of a symbol as like the little train on a level crossing sign when you're driving through the countryside. But that's a sign rather than a symbol. A symbol is a bit bigger than that. It's something visible, or tangible at least, that connects you with what is not visible. That's my definition anyway. It's something visible that connects you with something which is not visible. And not being visible, I don't mean it's spooky or supernatural or something. I just mean it's not something that you can actually pick up and look at or listen to directly. And from a Buddhist point of view, the symbol is something that's experienced through the senses or in your sensory imagination, but it evokes something of deep significance, something perhaps that can't be put into words, or at least words are not really adequate for it. And so the image, the symbol, replaces the words. So we tend to think, like I said, this wheel symbolizes the Dharma, or the truth. But that can be really misleading to say that, to say something symbolizes something else. Because the whole point about symbolism, it's not working through words, it's not working through concepts, it's reaching directly into your imagination. Now, thinking about the symbols can help you to make the connections. They could be pointers in the right direction. And so I'm going to risk talking about these symbols as well as showing them to you. And I'll explain a bit later on why I think that may help. With some of them, it may be okay for you just to look at it. And an example of that, I think, is an image of the Buddha. And I'll show you some images of the Buddha later. In a way, perhaps it's enough just to look at that, and its message is right there already. So the Dharma wheel, the wheel of the Dharma, it represents the teaching in Buddhism, but it comes from something earlier. I'll just say a little bit about it. In the old days in India, at least in legend, a great monarch who wanted to test the boundaries of his kingdom would send out a chariot with a single great wheel pulled by a horse. And this chariot would race down the roads of the kingdom until it was stopped. And it would be stopped by the army or the king of a neighboring kingdom. And rather than going off to fight, this would be a signal to the king that this is where your kingdom ends. So it's a symbol of kingship, but it's also a symbol of boundaries, or of testing boundaries. I think that's a really interesting reason for using the wheel. And when the Buddha was teaching, he said he was going to turn the wheel of truth. He said he was going to teach by turning the wheel of truth. He mentions this quite early on. In fact, the very first of the Buddha's teachings is known as the teaching on turning the wheel of truth, Dhamma Chakra Pravartana Sutra. And so he felt he was also turning a wheel. Maybe there's some symbolism to do with that, with the way that he taught in a systematic, smooth, rolling sort of way. But maybe also there's that hint of testing boundaries, of sending the chariot out to the borders of the kingdom. And when we are practicing Buddhism, studying Buddhism, or even when we're meditating, you could see it in those terms, that we are sort of staying with our safe, solid ground, but then we are reaching out. We are reaching out with our hands, and we're testing the edges of our experience. We're letting that wheel go out, and eventually it'll go out further and further. Those boundaries will expand more and more. It's got 8 spokes for the Noble Eightfold Path. It's sometimes said that the rim is ethics, that the spokes are meditation, and that the center of the wheel is wisdom. And you'll often see a swirling yin-yang style symbol at the center. Let's see if I can find a way of moving this one on. Here we go. Yeah, so here's another Dharma chakra, a Dharma wheel of Dharma, and you can see those swirling symbols in the center. And here, this is on the top of a temple in the Himalayas, in the mountains. And as with the first one, I expect you noticed that the wheel is flanked by 2 deer. And it's said that while the Buddha was teaching, especially when he was teaching the first sutra, the first teaching, he was in the deer park near Benares, and the deer would come and gather around the edge and listen to his teachings. So you'd always see this as the symbol for a monastery or a teaching institute in Buddhism is the wheel flanked by 2 deer. Now, in early Buddhist art, a number of symbols are used. This is very, very early, very old carving from just a few hundred years after the time of the Buddha. And whenever you saw the Dharma wheel, you'd see that it was representing the Buddha doing his teaching. And the wheel would appear on the pillars, the lion pillars that were erected by the great Buddhist emperor Ashoka in about 300 BC. In fact, this pillar, this is one of the old pillars, and it would have had a large wheel on the very top and wheels around the edge as well. You can see there's a bull and an elephant, there's other animals around this. And here they're not 8-spoked wheels, they're many spoked wheels. In fact, although there aren't 1,000, symbolically there are 1,000-spoked wheels. And this again was the emblem of kingship. And then if we look at this, I can't ask everybody, there's too many people here, but I expect if you're good at quizzes or if you have some connection with South Asia, you'll recognize this as the flag of India. And there in the middle of the Indian flag is the Dharma wheel, the wheel of Dharma. And this was placed on the flag by Nehru, the first Prime Minister of India. And he felt that the Buddhist heritage of India was something that he felt was very, very significant. And he wanted to depict that on the Indian flag. And the Ashokan wheel, he was himself was inspired by the great Buddhist emperor, the great non-violent Buddhist emperor Ashoka. Now, this one doesn't have a wheel. This is a tree with a throne underneath it, with people holding their hands up in the prayer mudra on either side. So what is going on here? Well, people's image when they think of Buddhism usually is not a wheel, it's usually a Buddha. But in Buddhist art, in early Buddhist art, there is no Buddha. You do not see the Buddha, and this is rather strange. And in fact, the Buddha's presence is always symbolized. His teaching is symbolized by a wheel. And the moment of enlightenment is symbolized by the Bodhi tree with a chair or a throne underneath it. So for some reason, and nobody really knows why, in early Buddhist art, they did not depict the Buddha. Some people speculate that it's because they felt that you couldn't show enlightenment. And the Buddha himself said, well, don't take any notice of this body. You know, really, enlightenment or the Dharma is something far vaster than that. And that's true with us as well. Our bodies are only one aspect of ourselves. So we see the Bodhi tree there. Another one here of the Bodhi tree and the throne. And the Bodhi tree, of course, is the Ficus religiosa tree, the Indian fig, under which the Buddha sat. It provided its shade for him while he was in his final night of meditation, approaching enlightenment. Here the tree is hung with necklaces of pearls, nets of pearls, and the tree was felt to be sacred and still is in Buddhism. And here's an example, I think from Thailand, of an old Bodhi tree surrounded by Buddha images, and people would come up on festival days, would do walking meditation around the tree and hang offerings in the Bodhi tree. So the Bodhi tree itself becomes a symbol, and the trees are very significant in the life of the Buddha. He's born under a tree, His mother is said to have held onto the branch of a tree while he was being born. His first meditation experience was under the rose apple tree. He went out into the forest, lived in the forest for many years while he was practicing. His enlightenment was under a tree. He moved under many trees in that grove in the weeks after his enlightenment while he was deciding how to progress Buddhism. He taught under trees through his whole life, and he died on a couch, a stone couch between two trees. And this is very significant. The tree is that emblem of roots deep in the ground, the branches reaching into the sky, the emblem of growth and also of strength and stability. And he felt grateful to the tree. It said he spent 7 days gazing at the Bodhi tree in gratitude after his enlightenment. And another emblem for the Buddha, before we see actual images of the Buddha, is the Buddha's footprint. And this symbolizes the Buddha's, the way that he would teach by touring around. He never stayed in one place for more than just a rainy season at a time. And then he would spend his time walking from village to village, from town to town. And so you'll often see these emblems of the Buddha's footprint. And in the middle of the Buddha's footprint is the Dharma Wheel. And also underneath it is, we'll come back to this later, is an emblem for the three jewels: the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha: enlightenment, the teaching, and the community. Perhaps the most important of all Buddhist symbols. And there's another one of the Buddha's footprints. There's one of the Buddha's footprints in Sri Lanka, which is found in a rock, is a natural formation, and I think some people literally thought it was the footprint of a Buddha, but it's actually 18 inches long. And so they decided that the Buddha must have been like 9 or 10 foot tall from the basis of this footprint. But he wasn't. He was a normal human being of normal size. Now, at last we get the image of the Buddha turning up. And this may be the very, very first time the Buddha is imaged. This is a gold coin. The gold coin is from a Greek-speaking kingdom called Kanishka, I think. And I've seen this coin. They had it on display in the Fitzwilliam Museum a few years ago. Now, what may surprise you, or may not, because I've just given you a clue, is if you look at the script down the side, it's actually in Greek, and it's B-O-D-D-O. I think beta omicron, delta, delta omicron. Bodo. So there, they've not just depicted the Buddha in a fairly familiar way, the standing Buddha with the halos around him, but they've also named him as best they could in Greek. And this is significant because the Greeks had a tradition of depicting their gods and also their great heroes and their great rulers. And it's often said that the image of the Buddha was based on the image of Apollo in Greek art. And that the Greeks, in a way, persuaded perhaps the Buddhists when they met after the Alexandrian conquests of some of the kingdoms on the northern boundary of India. The Greeks persuaded the Buddhists that it was possible to show an enlightened human being. It was possible to do this. Let's have a go. This is rather a crude attempt, but we'll see some much nicer ones. For example, here's a beautiful image of the Buddha from the kingdom of Gandhara, also a Greco-Indian kingdom ruled by the generals of Alexander the Great and their successors. So a very strongly Greek-looking image, especially the drapery, if you look at the way that's done. But yet it's also a Buddha in meditation, with his hands in the meditation gesture, supported by lions on a lion throne, and with another image of one of the stories of the Buddha below it. So people are here, they're trying to depict enlightenment. So it's an impossible thing to do. You cannot depict enlightenment, but yet you can try. And I think this is very significant. So if we look at attempts in different Buddhist countries to depict enlightenment, we'll see more or less success in different cases. This one is from Java. It's actually the British Museum, but it's a head somebody stole from Borobudur, the great Buddhist temple, which I'll show you later, in Java. So what are we trying to do? Particularly in the Buddha's face, we're trying to depict compassion, serenity, an intense stability, I suppose, basic kindness, happiness as well. All these things are trying to be depicted by the artist. And it's produced some of the world's greatest art, it seems to me, that attempts to depict the Buddha and other enlightened people and mythical creatures have produced some absolutely wonderful art. If you ever go to Amsterdam, for example, go to the Rijksmuseum and look at the beautiful depiction from the 13th century in wood of the Bodhisattva of Compassion, Avalokiteshvara. This is a Chinese version from the exhibition they had at the Royal Academy a few years back of the Buddha's face. I should say that it's not just in the face that the artists, of course, are trying to show enlightenment. They're also showing it in the posture of the Buddha, whether he's walking or whether he's seated, whether he's teaching or whether he's deep in meditation. The posture is also showing enlightenment. I think this is in India. This was an image used to advertise a film on the life of the Buddha, where Richard Gere did the narrating, and I think it's a Gupta image from India. And this one's from Korea, and I quite like this one because the attempt here is obviously not so much to produce a wonderful work of art, but to produce somebody who is incredibly friendly. And I think that to see the Buddha as incredibly friendly is very important. I think sometimes we may be trained almost to see religious figures or even sort of divine figures as being either very, very remote or very threatening or very powerful. But the Buddha should always be shown as supremely welcoming, as completely non-judgmental. And here he's shown with his right hand in the gesture of fearlessness, just bestowing fearlessness, and his left hand in the gesture of generosity, of giving. So that's Korea. So I've just thrown, well, I'm going to do another slideshow called Meeting the Buddhas, where we'll look at a lot more images of the Buddha and how it works and what the mudras mean. But I'll finish with this one as a modern image. This is actually from the Norwich Buddhist Centre, an image by Arloka, where he's using some of the techniques of 20th century art and approaches of 20th century art, and this wonderful sort of cubist background of city buildings, but he's also combining it with the traditional way of depicting the Buddha. And then the halo, somehow the halo depicts the Buddha's state of mind at the moment of enlightenment. Now, when the Buddha taught, he also used symbols, he used images, he used metaphors, he used symbols. And I'm going to show you some of the symbols that are used now in teaching Buddhism. So this will be very familiar to many of you, the Tibetan Wheel of Life. And that's got a few emblems on it showing as a teaching aid. It's basically, it's a sort of a PowerPoint presentation in one big temple image. And if you're interested in that, there will be a course coming up soon on the Wheel of Life by Vajra. So look out, make sure you're on our mailing list to get the newsletter every week. And go to the website if you want to get on that. And that'll be announced on the website, and Vajra will be teaching a course based on the Wheel of Life. It's a wonderful way of looking at and understanding Buddhism, understanding the nature of the human predicament. And here at the very center of the wheel, you'll see the three basic negative emotions of delusion, the pig, of craving and grasping, which is meant to be a cockerel, and of aversion or hatred, the snake. And they're biting each other as they swirl around and round, producing all the problems that we have. And then you have the bright path which leads away from that center, and the dark path that just perpetuates that process. And I won't say any more about that. There's the Wheel of Life obviously is a good subject, not just for a whole lecture, but for a whole course. But within it, it contains many other symbols. For example, this is one of the little elements around the edge of the Wheel of Life. And this is depicting human consciousness, or even just consciousness in general, because here we have a troop of monkeys, and the monkeys are a good emblem for our mind, for our consciousness, reaching for things, playing with each other, climbing everywhere, taking an interest, very, very active, but sometimes a little bit overactive. Yes, I find the monkey mind is quite a good emblem for my own consciousness. This is from a Tibetan image. And another image, not from the Wheel of Life, is this one, which some of you may be able to guess what it is. Well, it's a turtle swimming deep in the ocean, and the turtle is looking up. This is a Japanese image. And the turtle is, I said looking up, but actually the turtle is blind. So the turtle is reaching up to the surface, and on the surface there is a plank of wood with a hole in it. And it's said, according to traditional Buddhism, that some of the time we're like this turtle, this blind turtle floundering in the ocean, not really knowing where up is, even maybe not being able to emerge from the ocean. And it's said that if you lose your human consciousness, if you descend to the lower realms where you don't have self-awareness, it's going to take you a long time, many, many lifetimes, to be able to regain that human consciousness where enlightenment is possible. And it's likened to the blind turtle by chance sticking its head through the hole in the plank when it finally surfaces, when it only surfaces once every 100 years. And then a very significant emblem or image in Buddhism is the lotus, the image both of purity, because the lotus grows from the mud and emerges absolutely pure and pristine in the sunshine above the water's surface, but also an image for human growth, for unfolding. You'll see this everywhere. You'll see Buddha images sitting on lotuses, holding lotuses, and of course the Buddha had here's a lotus with the Buddha, and the Buddha had a vision of all humanity like a great lake filled with lotuses in different stages of growth. So growth is the big positive message of Buddhism, that everybody can grow, everybody can develop, everybody can flourish, everybody can open like a flower, but it has to happen organically. You can't scrabble with your fingers in the flower and force it open. You've got to just let the flower sit there in the sunlight, the light of truth, the light of awareness and mindfulness, and it will, of its own accord, slowly open. So it's a very beautiful emblem. It seems to me, that emblem of the lotus. One of the most beautiful oil blossoms. If you get a chance to see one, do. They have lotuses in Kew Gardens, in the houses there. They won't grow in the outdoors. And in other botanical gardens, have a look for the lotuses.
Ratnaprabha,
yeah.
There's a question from Karyana.
Yes.
It says, what's the significance of lions in Buddhism?
Oh, yes. Well, I'll just mention one thing about lions, and many animals turn up as emblems in Buddhism. But it's said that when the lion roars in the jungle, and the Indian lion lives in the jungle, not in the plains, when the lion roars in the jungle, all the other animals fall silent. And it's said similarly, when the Buddha gave his teachings, all other teachers fell silent because they recognized the value of what he was saying. And so his teaching is often known as a lion's roar, particularly when he was very assertive. And other Buddhist teachers, when they were very assertive in their teaching, saying, no, that is just not the case. He might have given some example of, for example, the prejudices that people hold for each other, for example, the caste system. You'd say, no, you are not made a good human being by your birth, you're made a good human being by your actions, by your behavior in life. And he would say this very boldly and very strongly. He would insist on it. And this was known as his lion's roar. So that's one. You can probably think of other connections with lions as well, supporting the Buddhist throne. But yeah, thanks, Karyana, for that. Good question. And we get to, in Buddhist teaching, I'm talking about using symbols in Buddhist teaching at the moment, and we get to some very elaborate ones, as well as the Tibetan Wheel of Life. Have a look at this one. This is the path of the elephant, taming the elephant mind. So the elephant represents the mind, and it starts at the bottom and finishes at the top. And you can imagine, again, a whole lecture on the different stages of this. You'll see the elephant is very muddy at the beginning, but imagine will gradually wash the mud off. The elephant is being led by a monkey, and a Buddhist practitioner is chasing after it at the beginning, rather far behind, gradually catches up with it. Different symbols and emblems appear at different stages, but this is the Buddhist, what's known sometimes as the spiral path, the path that takes your mind towards liberation, where the practitioner, the monk, is now riding on the elephant, brandishing the sword of wisdom, rainbows flowing from his or her heart, and flames, the flames of transformation, flowing out, if you look at the very top of the picture. Now I'm going to give the next week's slideshow is not going to be on this particular emblem, but a very similar one from Zen Buddhism, which is known as taming the bull, and the progressive stages of taming the bull. And I thought that would be an interesting one to look at in terms of a more focused Buddhist symbol. How does the mind work on itself? And it works on itself a little bit like a small boy chasing after a wild bull initially, and gradually learning to befriend the bull. And I won't say where that gets to in the end, but it's very magical, lovely story. So that'll be next week. And now another Buddhist symbol is maybe the most obvious thing you will see if you go to a Buddhist country. Now some of you who had an enriched childhood may recognize this from Tintin in Tibet by Hergé, the great Belgian cartoonist. And Tintin and Captain Haddock arrive in Tibet, and they go into the mountains, they meet the lamas, they encounter Buddhism, and what they encounter there, of course, is a stupa. But the stupa, or chorten as it's known in Tibet, is not a Tibetan symbol. It's there in every single Buddhist country. It's the most obvious thing you'll find if you visit a Buddhist country, is a chorten. And I'm going to give a slideshow later on the stupa as well. The stupa is full of significance, full of symbolism. This is the great stupa at Sanchi, a very ancient one, 2,000 years old. And you would visit the stupa, and your practice would be to do walking meditation, going round and round the stupa. And people would cover the stupa in little lights, so it could be seen at night from miles around. There are lots of symbolism here, but you'll see a sort of a platform or a cage type thing at the very top, which is the fire altar. Above that, you'll see the royal parasol. You have the great mound of the stupa, and beneath it you have one or more platforms where people could walk around. So this shows you a little bit about the symbolism of it. The drum at the bottom, the hemispherical dome of the basic stupa, the harnika, which is the fire altar, and the parasols on the top. And they develop in different countries into different kinds of symbolism. And eventually you get this kind of thing from Pagan in Burma, these very lofty stupas reaching into the sky. The stupa was originally a burial mound for a great teacher or a great king, and the Buddha himself had 8 stupas. After his death, 8 stupas were built to house his ashes. And then the greatest stupa in the world is this one here in Java, Borobudur. Those trees are big trees. I don't know if you can see any human beings there, but I've been to this stupa and it is vast and it's absolutely wonderful. And it's a stupa which is covered with tiny stupas on the top as well. I'll say more about that when we do the slideshow on the stupa. That shows you these little stupas on the top, each of which contains a Buddha in teaching mudra, and another stupa in the middle. And then this is in East Asia. The stupas take these lovely building forms, where you can actually go inside them. This particular one is Vietnamese, but you'll probably recognize pagodas from Japan as well. And then we come back home. This is in Milton Keynes, known as the Peace Pagoda by Willen Lake. I was very lucky to be there when that was inaugurated. See the lions guarding the steps again, and a figure of the Buddha, standing figure of the golden figure of the Buddha there in a niche in the Milton Keynes Peace Pagoda. Worth a visit. Surrounded by 1 million cherry trees. And here's a little tantalizing glimpse of some of the different kinds of stupa and the symbolism of the elements associated with the stupa: earth, water, fire, wind, and, well, void should be space or consciousness. And even matching the stupa with the human body here, the chakras of the human body. It's probably a little bit tantalizing, some of this show, because you might want to have lots of questions about this, but I will do a slideshow on this. And to some extent, this is an introductory slideshow on Buddhist symbols in general. But if you're interested, do look it up. There's some good stuff on the internet about stupas. And the next symbol I want to move on to is the vajra. And again, I'm going to give a whole slideshow on the vajra and the symbolism of the vajra, incredibly rich symbolism. And at first, the vajra, well, it's to do with forcibleness, to do with breaking through, and it originates in the thunderbolt, the bundle of thunderbolts held by the great sky gods in the different Indo-European religions. But the Buddha takes it over, and there it becomes a symbol of breaking through, of the power of the mind to break through, and also a symbol, though, of duality becoming non-duality. It's a very rich symbol indeed. So it's transformation of energies, it's using energy. And you'll see it in, again, these very old Buddhist images being wielded, in this case, by Vajrapani, the thunderbolt holder, but who's in the form of Heracles or Hercules. So the figure standing next to the Buddha here is holding in his left hand a vajra, a diamond thunderbolt, the vajra, as a protector of the Buddha, a protector in the sense of somebody who's providing the Buddha's energy, in a sense. But then later, a whole branch of Buddhism is associated with the Vajra, the Vajrayana, the way of the Vajra, or the path of the Vajra, the vehicle of the Vajra. And so this is a much later depiction of Vajrapani, the Vajra holder, from Japan, where this esoteric form of Buddhism, Vajrayana Buddhism, flourishes, as it does in China and Tibet and elsewhere. And so in Tibet, the Vajra will actually be used in ritual. So this is a Tibetan monk with a bell in his left hand and a Vajra in his right hand. And various gestures are used in the rituals representing the use of the Vajra. And if you look at a diagram of the Vajra, you'll see the richness. These figures are called makaras. They're like crocodiles with elephant trunks and ram's horns. And it's out of their mouths that the prongs of the Vajra, usually 5 prongs, 1 in the middle and 4 around the edge, come. And they emerge from lotus blossoms, and those emerge from the central sphere of non-duality. I'm very aware that this is all perhaps a bit, I hope it's intriguing, but of course there's so much more one could say, and I will give that whole lecture on the Vajra as well. And we also have symbols, great arrays of symbols in Buddhism. These are known as the auspicious signs. You'll see one of them is the lotus that we've already seen, and one of them is the Dharma Wheel that we've already seen. And these auspicious signs, 8 of them, are associated with gifts that the Buddha was given after his enlightenment by different deities. So, for example, it's said that after his enlightenment, the Buddha was approached by the earth goddess before his enlightenment, when he was doubting his ability to gain enlightenment, and she came forward bearing the vase of immortality, the vase containing nectar, because she'd been watching him for lifetime after lifetime. So the image on the right is that vase of immortality that she presented to the Buddha to symbolize the deathlessness of enlightenment. And so each of these has a lot of symbolism to go into. And now they are auspicious. If you are a little bit superstitious, you can regard them as lucky charms. So, for example, on the left there, you'll see the auspicious signs, auspicious symbols as amulets. And one of them is the endless knot. And I actually called this talk the endless knot. The endless knot is a symbol of interconnectedness, how everything is intertwined, all of our experience is intertwined. And that's the one, the sort of the, what would you call it, sort of a filigree symbol next to the fish. That's the endless knot. I'll just mention what the symbols are in case you want to look them up. As we go through them, if you look in the upper left, that's the royal parasol. Parasols, you remember that you saw them on the top of the stupa. And then we have the conch shell, the symbol of the sound of the Dharma. And then we have the vase of nectar. And then we have the banner of victory. And then we've already seen it, the eight-spoked wheel of Dharma. Then we have the two fish, the two golden carp. And this is because it's said that it's as if we are like that turtle lost in the ocean. But there are creatures that feel completely at home in the ocean of ordinary life. And so that's our aspiration, is no longer to feel that it's something where we're drowning, where we're being tossed hither and thither, but something where we can swim freely in companionship with each other, the two fishes, then the endless knot, and then the lotus. So time's getting on, so I won't say more about that. There's a close-up of the fish and another one from a pavement. I also wanted to mention that symbols don't necessarily have to be purely visual. They don't have to be things you can read in a book. Dancing, for example, is a Buddhist symbol. And these are Lama dances from Tibet, which have their own significance. Sound is a symbol. Mantras are themselves symbols of aspects of enlightenment. Deep significance can be conveyed without words if you just watch a dance, if you listen to music, if you listen to the chanting of mantras. There it's coming through to you. And then maybe the most basic symbol in Buddhism is the three jewels. On the kesa that Kashamitra and I and others are wearing, you can see the emblem of the three jewels. Looks like that. The Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The yellow jewel is the Buddha, the blue is the Dharma, the red is the Sangha, or the spiritual community. The three most precious things. They're called jewels because they're the most precious things in Buddhism. And I'll just show you what I find one of the funniest symbols in Buddhism is Jambala, who represents wealth. He's holding the victory banner in his left hand, that we've already seen. In his right hand, but in his left hand he's holding a mongoose, and the mongoose is vomiting jewels, which he's collecting in a pot between his feet. So there are these precious things, but for Jambala, he's got plenty of them because his mongoose vomits them up the whole time. And then another crucial symbol in Buddhism is the mandala, and you may or may not be able to guess what this mandala is made out of. It is made out of coloured sand, and it's one of this wonderful meditative practice of making a mandala. These take days and days to make it out of coloured sand, and then when it's finished, the whole thing is tipped into a river to symbolise impermanence. And the mandala represents completeness, integration in Buddhism. You can see in this mandala the symbols of the 5 Buddhas in the center of the mandala. I'll show you that again. So the 5 Buddhas of the 5 directions, the Dharma Wheel in the center, the jewels for the southern Buddha at the bottom. The eastern Buddha has a vajra. The northern Buddha has, in this case, a sword, sometimes a double vajra. And the western Buddha has, in this case, a begging bowl, sometimes a lotus. On the edge of the mandala, we have rings of lotuses, of vajras, and of flames protecting the mandala. The mandala representing the integrated, even enlightened mind. And the mandala can also be a mandala of qualities. These are the 5 spiritual qualities, with mindfulness at the center. Enthusiasm, balanced by meditation. Wisdom, balanced by the emotional strength of confidence or faith. And the mandala becomes most simple in the circle. And this is from the ox herding pictures. This is a circle in Enso from Zen Buddhism, actually drawn by Hakuin himself, one of the greatest of the Zen masters, who was also a great calligrapher. And in the ox herding pictures, you'll see that this emblem turns up. So if you're interested in that, come next week when we look at the ox herding pictures. And I'm going to finish this with a poem, because I think that words themselves can also act as symbols, can't they? And they're not necessarily explaining things. And the Buddha, in my view, was a great poet. And this from the Dhammapada is one of his poems describing the mind. So I'll read out the poem and then I'll finish. And if you want to put any more questions in the chat, please do so. I just want to thank you very, very much for coming along today. And we'll have this every week for the next few weeks. 11:30 Saturday mornings, we'll have this Dharma talk with a slideshow. On the 9th of May, it won't be me, that'll be Kusala, doing our usual monthly talk on the Noble Eightfold Path. And then on the 10th, it'll be Buddha Day, when I'm going to give a slideshow on the mythic figures who visited the Buddha at the time of his enlightenment. If you can donate something for the centre, that is really appreciated. A suggestion of £5 donation. If you look up in the chat, you should find the link to go to, or you can go to our website, northlondonbuddhistcentre.com. The donation really makes a difference, because we're not getting our normal income at the moment, and we need it to keep going. Okay, so this is what the Buddha says. Far-ranging is the mind, and it walks alone. It's not material. It sleeps in the cave of your heart. Keep it controlled, and you're free from the bonds of death. Thank you very much.
Bless you. Thank you so much.